I think the game that I don't think we've spoken about it at all, but the one we've both been playing, Pragmata from Capcom. The year of Capcom
Damn.
continues. The generation of Capcom continues in general. They were not content with having a banger in Resident Evil Requiem earlier this year, and they're like, you know what? Let's not only put out a second great game, but also a brand new IP. You know, the
Yeah.
thing that most publishers are pretty allergic to currently.
Mm.
So Pragmata is third person action game. Yeah, I mean
Mm.
it's not like just a shooter. It's
No.
more, it does the exploration and the platforming and the action stuff.
Mm.
But it's got this cool little wrinkle where you play as a guy named Hugh in a spacesuit that looks very bulky and very slow, but it actually moves quite quickly. And you've got a little girl who like chills on your back. She's an android and her name's Diana. And if you're watching the footage now, the combat is like multi-layered. You've got your third person shooting, but every time you aim at an enemy, this like matrix, this like grid pops up, and that's
Mm.
basically Diana hacking an enemy. And
Mm.
you've got to solve this like tile puzzle where you just navigate towards a green node. And when you do that, enemies' weak points open up. And that's kind of the only way you can do actual damage to them.
Yeah.
So you're bouncing between aiming at enemies, aiming at their weaker points on their body, but then also like hacking while you're doing that to open them up. And there's just a lot of cool like wrinkles in like enemy management, crowd control,
Mm.
um, and the ways that this hacking mini game changes over time with different types of nodes that pop up on the board that do different things, like freeze enemies or add like more stagger damage onto them, or increase the damage of their hack, or things, or like my favorite, multi-hack, where if you hack
Mm.
one enemy, it opens up all the other enemies around them. There's a lot of like very cool, very small decisions you need to make in the heat of battle that makes
Mm.
the combat, I think, feel very dynamic. And to me, that's the crux of what this game is. And I think it takes this like small idea that presents itself early in the game and seems like it's going to be very one note, but they expand upon that very naturally and
Yeah.
very with a lot more complexity than you expect. And I
Mm.
think it keeps the action very fresh and fun. And I've had a pretty good time with this game. How about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, going into this game, it's one of those weird exceptions where I knew, Capcom's making this game called Pragmata, and I knew the box art, but I hadn't watched like any gameplay. I knew nothing about the story, so I went into this game like knowing nothing, knew nothing about the hacking mini game, whatever. And I was just pleasantly surprised. Like, had no expectations, went in, and I've got some issues with the game, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think like you said, it's a third person action game, but the twist or the thing is this hacking mini game on the side, and it just adds this different dynamic to combat, which I can't say I've really seen. Maybe not a one for one, but I
Mm,
can't say I've seen that exact thing in another game. So it just
mm,
makes encounters a little bit more strategic, but also it adds this like fine balance of there's like tension, because obviously you might enter a room and there's 5 enemies, and it becomes this thing of like, okay, cool, who do I need to prioritize first? Okay, I'm hacking this person. Oh, I've got this node that does this. Should I use it here? Do I bank it for another enemy? So there's all these little micro decisions you're making, and
mm-hmm.
it makes for a very satisfying combat and gameplay loop. Every encounter, and I mean, it's not just the mechanically, it's also how they've done the feel of the game. The sound is great, the weapons feel strong, there's just a good
Yes.
feeling of this game, and it's kind of difficult to describe, but it's this weird thing where you said it earlier, Hugh's like in this, he's this chunky arm, looks something like Isaac from Dead Space, but if Isaac did gym, he's got like,
He's very Dead Space coded. I
yeah,
agree. Yeah.
it's Dead Space coded, but there's like a chunkiness to him. But he's got these boosters which let him like dash in directions, whatever. So it's just fun, and just the feeling of it feels so good. Yeah,
He's chunky. Like when I first saw his suit, I'm like, oh, he's gonna feel a bit lumbering in a similar way to like Isaac from Dead Space. Like
mm,
he moves very purposefully and slowly, and even when you sprint with Isaac, it's like thunks. You can
mm,
feel every footstep. This is like the complete opposite. Like when Hugh
Mm.
sprints, he fucking
Yeah.
goes. He moves, and it almost feels it. There's almost like this disconnect between the way he looks and the speed at which he moves, but
Mm.
it makes the gameplay feel so much faster and more in
Mm.
line with a. I don't know if you ever played Vanquish from Platinum
Yeah.
Games.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no shooter on Earth that is that fast, but it is more in line with that than it is with
100%,
like
yeah.
Dead Space. And I quite like that because I
Mm.
think the combat requires you to be a lot quicker than you think, especially when it starts getting complicated. I was listening to an interview with the game director on this, and he apparently has been an art director on previous. I don't know if it was Platinum or if it was like the Devil May Cry series. So he
Okay.
comes from a background of character action,
Yeah.
and you can kind of tell that there are elements of that in here with the way in which the combat requires you to be quick and to like
Mm.
context switch and crowd control. You mentioned the thunkiness or the chunkiness of the weapons. I think it's cool that you only have one permanent weapon.
Mm.
At the beginning, it's a pistol, and it eventually like evolves into other things. But all of your other weapons are limited use. So you've got an offensive slot, a tool slot, and a defensive one. And initially, you can only hold one weapon in each of those. Eventually, that like opens up a bit more. But if you pick up, say, a shotgun or whatever it's called, a
Mm.
shockwave gun, there's only like 5 or 6 bullets in that thing.
Mm.
If you pick up a charged, like a rail gun, there's only 6 bullets in that thing. So you are constantly thinking about, okay, what weapons are in the arena that I can pick up? What do I have in my inventory? Am I going to get close to these enemies, and am I going to take them out from afar? And you're encouraged to use these things pretty liberally because you do get them.
Mm.
It's something I had to shift my mindset on early on because I was like hoarding weapons. I'm like, no, I'm just going to use
You
my
gotta
pistol.
use
I
them,
don't
yeah.
need it. It's like if you don't use them, you're just wasting your time.
Mm.
But by the same token, I wasn't using a lot of my tools initially.
Yeah.
And eventually it was like I'm brushing up against the game just being very difficult.
Mm.
And I just came to the realization like, oh, I'm just not using all the tools it's giving me. Like I should be using this net that roots enemies in place, or this
Mm.
riot like grenade launcher that knocks them to the ground and opens them up for attacks, or I should be using my decoy a lot more to, um, distract enemies to like attack somewhere else. And
Mm.
when you start working through all the tools they give you, it doesn't make the game easy or trivial, but it becomes manageable.
Yeah.
And I really like that the combat forces you to think about these things more so than just like open up an enemy and shoot. It does feel like
Mm.
I'm solving a combat puzzle a lot of the times. And
Yeah.
it's really engaging. It's really fun.
Yeah. I think also I want to touch on how the game drip feeds you stuff constantly. Like, in terms of structure, I don't know what you expected of the game, because you obviously had just seen previews and stuff. You had an idea of what the game was, but even when I started up, kind of expected it to be like a point you run from A to B to C to D thing, and it kind of is that, but it's also not. It's not quite a Metroidvania, but the main playground in the game is, there's like certain hubs or levels that you can explore, and there's obviously different parts you can go through them, but I don't know, I wasn't quite expecting that. I almost expected a linear, you run through the game kind of thing. But instead, what you're getting is, as you play, you're getting different tools and like a handful of different abilities, whatever, that help you explore. You've got incentive to go back to some of the earlier areas. Like, oh, cool, now I can open up this door I couldn't before because I've got this new thing, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that means long term in terms of replayability. Like, when I roll credits, am I going to go back and play more of the game? I don't know, but it's not quite what I was expecting.
No, same. I mean, I played the demo and there was no indication that was the structure of the game, so it caught me off guard as well. I think levels is the right word. It's, again, in a character action sense, you're jumping from one stage to the next. There's no like connective tissue between the two. But then I find that these stages are like small little self-contained Metroidvania stages where you do have to find keys for certain doors. There are lots of hidden secrets. It's Metroidvania in the lighter sense.
Yeah.
But there is incentive to go back to previous levels and pick up things, especially when a lot of the items you miss are not essential, but additive items that you use for like upgrades. Upgrading your weapons, upgrading your health, this and that. I think it's really neat that on the level select screen, you're given a breakdown of this level, you missed XYZ, and also in these checkpoints in the levels, you've missed XYZ. So you can go back to the specific checkpoints or like sub areas where you've missed certain things and just play that. And the game makes it really easy for you to return back to your, I think it's called the shelter, like your hub, pretty frequently. It's a thing where initially I was like, oh, I don't want to go back to my hub. I'm just going to continue. And it's like, no, you should be going back there quite frequently to upgrade your stuff. Especially because like the bosses at the end of each of these levels get quite intense. And when I wasn't keeping up with upgrading, they were rolling over me. It was the game's surprisingly difficult in a way that I wasn't expecting as well. There's obviously difficulty levels that you can choose, but even on a standard one, I'm like, wow, this is not a cakewalk. Like the bosses especially were really doing some numbers on me, but in a very fun way again. So the structure of the game is a bit strange, and I think that's also what where the story kind of struggles. This is my main critique of the game, is the story just doesn't feel that interesting. I think Hugh and Diana are really cool. I think their dynamic and their sort of arc is really fun. Like Hugh starting the game off being like, oh, I'm a loner, I don't really have much friends or family, you know. He even makes a remark at one of the earlier characters being like, oh, you've got kids, that sounds a bit rough. And then obviously he has this sort of like found family moment with Diana, and they turn into this really cool dynamic of Hugh teaching her about the world, and you know, because she's kind of like this, she's this android, she doesn't understand humanity, but in a very innocent way. And I think it's just cool seeing them interact and like growing their relationship. But the story that they're involved in with, you know, they're on the moon, they're in a base that's like 3D printed, which is kind of neat. And there's some like rogue AI that's gone on. I think it gets a bit deeper near the end and you start understanding why certain things are happening. But even then, it feels very predictable in a way. And I just don't really care much for it.
No, that's the story in a nutshell. It's like, so you arrive on the moon, bad things happen. Oh no, AI did something. And that's pretty much that's the story. I mean, I'm like half an hour away from finishing this game. Like I know I'm right at the end, and there's a twist upon a twist upon a twist. Like I know I'm on the tail end of this game, whatever. But the story has been that, and the only thing like coloring in the little gray areas in the background, it's like you pick up notes, and you know there's little things you find that give you context of what is going on in this moon base, and that's interesting. But in terms of the actual beat to beat moments, it is, I think you said it earlier, the way the levels are, that's what makes it feel a little bit disjointed almost. It's this weird thing where when I started the game I was like, oh, not like Dead Space, but like, oh, okay, it's a bit tense, you know, like Hugh's alone in this planet with on the moon with Diana, and like there's all these robots out to kill them, but then it's like it's pretty light-hearted, which is okay, but I almost expected something more mature from the story of like, oh, you know, like here's some social commentary on something, but it's not. It really is. It's just like, I don't know, something went wrong with the AI. Like I'm obviously still trying to get to the big like reveal, whatever. But it's like, oh, okay, it doesn't feel like there's any sort of, like there are hints in some of the notes of like, yeah, it's weird, the AI is like doing this, but it's not like this build up in the way I expected. I think that's where the biggest flaw of the game comes in, is it's just like, the story's fun. The dynamic between the two, fantastic. And maybe a bit cliche of, oh, you know, she doesn't, Diana's an AI, she doesn't know anything. And, you know, Hugh says something and she's like, what do you mean by that? And he has to explain it. But it's still like endearing and cute to hear him explain it. And I love those moments. So like, I'm not going to criticize the game on that. I just kind of expected maybe a bit more from the story side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you in that sometimes it is cliche. Some of Hugh's lines are a bit like eye rolling, just the way he explains things. I'm just like, where did you come from?
Yeah.
But it's done very earnestly and very like authentically. So it is endearing. I think the only part of the story that kind of captivates me is like, what is Diana? What is a Pragmata? Where does she come from? And you do get answers to that. Again, they're not like oh my god, that was a big twist. It's more just like,
No,
oh,
it's
okay,
kind of
yeah,
what you
I've
expected,
seen this
actually.
before. Yeah. I think the coolest part of the setting and the story is that the fact that this takes place on the moon and everything is 3D printed, it allows the different levels and biomes to look very different and varied because
Mm,
it's basically these scientists there who are experimenting with this tech, and what do they end up, building are they're building things that they miss from the world.
mm,
They're trying to recreate things essentially, and so you've got this level early on, which takes place in what looks like Times Square, even though you're kind of in a lab on the moon.
mm,
There's another one which takes place in like this built up forest.
mm.
It's cool that each level has this distinct look to it that breaks up the, very reflective white hallways that
Yeah,
connect them. Because I was worried about that at the beginning. I'm like, this looks good, but if it's going to be like this the entire game, it's going to feel very sterile.
100%. Yeah.
So it's got a really cool like visual variety, and the game it looks really good. Like from a
Yeah,
technical level, there's a lot going on at any given time. It looks great, and it runs at a very high frame rate, so it's really cool.
this engine, man.
Mm,
But yeah,
top
it's
tier.
wild to think this is the same engine that made Resident Evil,
Yeah.
recently. But yeah, to your point earlier, it's a same thing where, again, I went into this game not knowing anything about it really. So and mild spoiler, it's like the second level. When I rolled into a recreation of New York, it's like, oh, I did not like this is beautiful. I was expecting just white corridor moon base and laboratory stuff. So to walk into that level and go like, oh, okay, they're going to play around with this game, and they do for the most part. Some of the
Mm.
levels are these variations, whatever. So it was a nice thing to see, and I think they had fun with it as well. It's like, yeah, you're on the moon, but going to make you feel like
It's kind
you.
of funny. You should hunt down the very first trailer for Pragmata, which I think was 2024, 2023. It was it got announced and then just didn't appear for a long time. It
Mm,
was sort of it's similar to like Capcom's Deep Down. I think people just assumed it was never coming again.
yeah.
And then when it did resurface, it was like, oh, coming in 2026, and that felt like a year that didn't exist.
Mm,
But the very first trailer is Hugh. I mean, he doesn't talk. There's Hugh and there's Diana. There's like a little girl, and they're like holding hands, and they're in New York. It looks like
okay.
New York, and you're like, why is the spaceman in New York? So
Okay. Yeah.
it's cool that they had that idea or that sense of the setting super early
Yeah.
on, and then just built on that, which I think is kind of neat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I'll take my hats off to Capcom. You mentioned it up front where they've just like Resident Evil came out not that long ago, and you think they'd be content like, yeah, cool, we've got Resident Evil out. Let's just sit back and let's just bank Pragmata for late in the year, but they're like, nah, put out a couple weeks later, and it's really good.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to win Game of the Year necessarily. As much as I love it, I think
Mm.
critically it's not going to stand up against some of the bigger contenders. But I love that Capcom took a swing, and I think, okay, like again, not Game of the Year material, but they hit very well. And I would be
Yeah.
shocked if we don't see a sequel. Like again, don't know how the game ends, but I'm pretty sure this is like a new IP that they're going to keep investigating. So I'd be very keen to see what they do with the sequel, because this is a
Yeah, absolutely.
fantastic
Absolutely.
foundation. Like way better than I thought it would be. Again, no
Yeah.
expectations, but completely blown away by how much I've enjoyed this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a super strong first effort. Not in the sense of like, oh yeah, there are rough edges,
Mm,
but this is if you had to give it a score, this is a solid 8 out of 10 any
mm,
day of the week for me. And I agree with you. It's not going to be like a nominee for Game of the Year. It might crop up in terms of like visual
yeah,
categories
some
and maybe
categories, yeah.
sound and stuff. But this is a game where it's like, cool, Capcom nailed this as a new IP. It seems to be selling very well. It sold like 1
Mm,
million copies in the first 2 days. So I think from a commercial standpoint, it makes sense to make a sequel. But I would
mm,
definitely love to see these ideas expanded on again in a sequel, because I
mm,
think there's a lot more juice here than I thought there would be. And I think now, having seen that, there's a lot more that they can get from it. I think these ideas are a cool foundation, like you said. So yeah, very cool that we're getting a new IP from Capcom that is also really like good, and they just keep hitting it, man. they rarely miss, honestly.
I just I just need Pragmata to give me definitive evidence that this takes place in the same universe as Resident Evil. You know, when you get to
Could
the
you
end,
imagine?
when you get to the end and Leon appears on the moon, it's like, like, wow, Capcom, okay.
Hugh and Diana go back to Earth and it's actually zombies. Turns out Diana's
It
completely
would be hilarious. Yeah,
useless in
the
that
whole
scenario.
time they've been on the moon, it's like, damn, Raccoon City happened while you guys were up there. Like, oh my God, I can't believe, how long were we up there for? 30
I'm
years.
actually almost shocked there isn't some sort of Easter egg being like, I got transferred to the moon from Raccoon City.
Oh, yeah. 100%, but I'm sure you saw there were tons of nods to Resident Evil.
I saw the posters, yeah. I saw the posters.
And there was one like billboard and it's something Wesker. I was like, I see you, Capcom. I see what you're doing. That's really cool.
It would have actually been really funny if you like wandered into a room and there's just one zombie and you're like, I can't do anything against this thing, and the door just closes or something stupid. It'd be quite fun. Or if Tofu appears somewhere.
Oh yeah, or you pick up a note. It's like itchy, scratchy. You're like, yes, Capcom.
That would have been really cool.
Very good. I see what you've done here.
That would have been fun.
But yeah, Pragmata, really good time. And again, I know this is an argument. So people will be like, but I don't want to pay full price for a 12-hour game. Man, it's a good 12 hours. And I don't know what the replayability is like, but I'm happy to see Capcom like completely embracing it's a single player game. Bam. It's an enclosed experience. There's no fancy microtransactions or season passes necessarily, whatever. It's like it's just a self-contained thing.
Yeah.
And they're like completely okay with that in some of their intellectual properties, which is cool.
And I think they could do, Resident Evil's the same thing, but Resident Evil gets DLC. They get story DLC, but you also get like Mercenaries mode, which is like arcadey, like run-based stuff. They could do that.
They could do that with.
I could see like a Mercenaries-esque mode here with that. The combat definitely holds up for that. So, I mean, they haven't announced anything, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's something like that gets added.
Yeah, just like a new mode or something.